Shalom and welcome. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Abba Horowitz, Temple Jam.
Shalom.
And we're going to be discussing one of your favorite topics today. You'll find out in a minute what that is. I just want to remind everybody that we are podcasting from the Temple Institute here in Jerusalem, Israel. Our website is templeinstitute.org. We have a Facebook page. We have a Twitter feed. We have Instagram. We have a YouTube channel, Temple Institute YouTube channel. And our podcasts are also can be found on Deezer and on Spotify. So welcome to Temple Jam. Welcome, Abba.
Thank you. You forgot Rumble, maybe, at some
We don't
point?
have Rumble at this point, no.
Okay. Soon, hopefully, we'll be on Rumble as well.
Okay, you'll tell me about it because
I'm going to discuss it with Reuven. For those that, Yitzchak, sorry. For those that know about Rumble, you'll understand why.
Okay.
Anyway, today's topic, Yitzchak.
Yes. Drum roll.
Okay. It is the Para Aduma.
Ooh, the red heifer.
The red heifer, yes.
My favorite topic, and I think a lot
Yes.
of people out there really love talking about the red heifer. What are we talking about today?
Well, we're going to talk about actually colors in the Bible and colors in the Talmud time. Definition of colors, how many were there, and how that impacts the color of the red heifer. As you know, in the Psukim in Parshat Chukat, which is in Bamidbar. Bamidbar is
Numbers.
Numbers, there you go.
Chapter 19, I think.
Could be.
so,
Parshat
yeah.
Chukat, which
Yeah.
is all about the red heifer. One of the psukim there says that it has to be para aduma timima. And the word aduma sounds like red, and then timima is without a blemish. So what is aduma? What characterizes
Right.
that color of aduma? How do we define that color? Obviously, as we all know, there's spectrums to a color.
Right.
So that could impact what's considered actually red.
There's, I mean, just off the top of my head, there's fire engine red, there is russet, there is, I don't know, there's...
Well,
there's
there's rose-colored
rose color.
red. There's burgundy, which also has red in it.
Right.
There's a lot of different colors. There's probably hundreds
I would say, yeah.
in
yeah.
that spectrum.
And so some people, I think, think that the paraduma must be some kind of bright, glowing red animal, some kind of supernatural creature. That's not the case.
Right.
Everything that the Torah, all the mitzvot, all the commandments are dealing with this world. These are things that God created for us to perform these mitzvot with in order to connect with Hashem. So there's no hocus pocus, there's no anything supernatural or surreal here. We're talking about a natural color. So let's try to figure out what that
Correct.
color is.
And perhaps in the word itself, aduma, there's a hint.
Yeah.
Because it also has the word adama, which is
Means
ground,
earth.
the ground, earth.
Right.
And-
Adam.
And as
first
we know,
man
earth is not really red, but rather it's brown.
Right.
So
right.
perhaps certain brownish, reddish colors would be permissible. So here's an interesting thing before we get into the colors of the world, is there is no real definition anywhere. It's not defined any further, the word aduma. So when it comes to, for example, a woman who has menstruation, so also there we call it dam nida, the blood of a woman
Right.
who's menstruating. And there actually it's clear there are many different colors that are also
Right.
perhaps prohibited or permitted, depending on the color of it, within that range of red.
I would
Okay.
even say that you mentioned dam, which is blood in Hebrew, shares two of the three letters of the word adam, which is the root of the word aduma, which red. So I would tend to believe that the word dam is because blood is red. But again, like you said, blood comes in all different.
It could be black,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
what's a blacker one or a browner.
Right.
But again, that's nida separate. But when it comes to the paraduma itself, there's no clear understanding of what aduma is.
Right.
And so that's why we get into the colors of the world. Okay.
Yeah, and people have sent us photos, and you can even look on Google Images, and photos of different breeds of red cows from all over the world, and they're all, I think anybody would say they're red, but each one's a little different from the other.
Right.
So
Right. And so once again, because there's no clear definition, it would seem it would be a broader definition of the word aduma or red. So I just wanted to point out that Rav Azariah Ariel, who is Rav Yisrael Ariel's son,
Right.
is a big scholar and a researcher, I'd even call him as well, in the area of the Mikdash, and actually his expertise, world expertise,
Yeah.
is actually on the red heifer.
Right.
And he's been publishing quite a few books on it. And there's an article that was published in what's called Malim B'Kodesh, which is a periodical that comes out twice a year that all has to do with the temple. So it's like a journal on the temple, different articles that are written there. And the article that Rav Azariah wrote here is called Tseva HaParaduma, the color of the paraduma. And what he shows in the beginning is that in the Bible and the Mishnah and the Talmudic time, that in the Hebrew language, there are only 4 names for colors. Okay? And that would be Adom, red. Shachor, black. Yarok, green.
Right.
And Lavan, which is white. Now, you notice in there's no brown, no blue,
Right.
no purple.
Right.
Right? So
There were people might say, what about Argaman? What about Techelet? The colors that were used in the Big Day Kuna and a lot of things in the temple, the Techelet blue and the Argaman purple, those words aren't names of colors.
So
They're names
Yafet, very good. Yeah, so he actually, Rav Azariah brings a proof to that, actually multiple proofs, that what you just said is 100% correct. That Tchelet, that royal blue that we put on our tzitzit, right, is not a color, but rather he says it was a shem shel chomer. It was essentially a material. It was referred to as a material, not an actual color. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because the color blue really doesn't exist in nature.
Right, it's the rarest color. I read a book written by one of the people in Patil Techelet that make the Techelet now for the tzitziot.
Oh, I read that. That book.
Baruch Sturman, and he says that it's the rarest natural color. We think it's very ubiquitous because you see the sky and the water, but the color blue is not in that. It's just the refraction of the sun, whatever.
Correct.
And reflection and everything. But in nature itself, blue is exceedingly rare, which is why I imagine it became such a precious color. You know, Jews use it to this day for the tzitzit, but back in the day, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, had his entire ketonet, tunic out of blue, and many of the things, the parochet, the big curtain in the Mikdash, the temple had a lot of blue in it. This tchelet, and the Romans used it for their royalty, and in fact, they're the ones who cornered the market and pushed the Jews out of the Techelet dye industry. The Jews were the big dyers.
It's very precious.
I was reading a book about Sicily, and even much later on, they would bring in Jews, because they were expert dyers. So they didn't lose the profession altogether, but they lost the ability to make Techelet, which is why for 2,000 years almost, Jews just wore white tzitziot. Only recently have they revived the industry of producing the Techelet from a snail.
Correct. Murex tranquillus, it's
Very
called.
Very nice, yeah.
And if I may add one final comment on Tchelet, because we're getting sidetracked from the Paraduma. But in the Tchelet Institute, they had in Amsterdam, it was a lab that did a study on the actual color of this Murex tranquillus, which produced this particular blue color called Tchelet. And you have spectrums of colors within blue, many, hundreds and hundreds of them. And it registered on their scale on the blue that they have defined as 613 within the spectrum of all colors, which would represent the Taryag mitzvot, the 613 mitzvot in the Torah.
And of course, why do we have our tzitziot? So we can look at them and recall the 613 mitzvot. So it's a very beautiful revelation.
Correct.
Modern revelation of the truth.
Correct.
Of
but
the Torah.
Getting back to our topic, is because we can, what you don't understand, and Yitzchak and I could be here for hours just schmoozing and talking, and we don't even know what's going on around us. So we definitely will go on tangents. But getting back to here, so once again, is that Tchelet is the shem of a chomer. Okay, it's the name of a material. It's not a color.
Right.
So, and also we know that the color blue, more or less, would probably be more associated, get to black somehow, or green. Right? Blue is sort of between green and black. So it would be in one of those major colors.
Right. Cool colors.
Correct. And so anyway, the point being is that there are only 4 main colors. Now, there's a really interesting book. It was written by the Chachmat Adam The Chachmat Adam was a Rav who wrote another book called Chaye Adam, which is more popular. And essentially, it was the halachic book before the Mishnah Berurah came along in the world. So we'd say that he was a student of the Vilna Gaon, and he wrote this very nice halachic book, very quick halachot in the book called the Chaye Adam. And then in some places he'd expand a little bit, but pretty much it was very easy to look up halachot, sort of like a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch at the time, but a little more expanded. And then my father, for example, growing up, he said that they only used the Chaye Adam to be posek halakha, to render any halachas in the household. And then eventually the Mishnah Berurah came along and that became popular. Anyway, why am I explaining all this? Is because he wrote a book called Chachmat Adam. Chachmat Adam is on Yoreh De'ah, so it's on things like milk and meat and women's menstruation and all those halachot in a separate book called Chachmat Adam. And there he talks about the 4 primary colors, saying there are only 4 main colors in the world, okay? And that would be Shachor, Lavan, which is black and white, Yarok, and Adom, right?
Green and red.
But then he comes out with this landmark line where he says if you take the sac that the child's in, okay, that's called the shilya.
The embryonic sac, I guess.
Exactly. So that embryonic sac, which is essentially, the child is being created in that sac, it's referred to, it's an Aramaic word, but also in Hebrew today, shilya. Shin Lamed Yud Aleph. Shachor Lavon Yarok Adom. Those 4 primary colors, saying that the child being created, those 4 primary colors are also being used because those are the 4 main colors of creation.
Wow.
So that was a landmark idea.
That's a concept that we can wrap our brains around. And,
correct.
Try that one at home. That's one of those things you can try at home. Just think about that.
So
the 4 colors of creation.
That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So what Rav Azaria then does in this article is he goes through all those 4 colors, trying to define them, getting a better sense of how they work. Okay. And then he gets to, of course, a color that's not mentioned, brown. And what he does is he goes through, and this is really interesting. The word chum, which is brown in Hebrew, was only mentioned once in the Torah, and never again, essentially. And that was when Yaakov was taking the sheep, and he was trying to make a certain color sheep, right? One was spotted and one was non-spotted.
Engineering them,
Correct, he was doing that. So that's where the color brown was mentioned in the Torah.
And so that really was a manufactured color?
And so, so here, I'll just quote the verse. It's actually in Genesis 30:32. Okay, v'chosech chum b'ksavim. Okay, so and every sad that will be brown amongst every sheep that will be brown amongst all the other sheep. Okay, and then he says here, however, in the Mishnah and the Gemara, the word chum, brown, is not mentioned.
Wow.
Okay.
Is there any explanation why?
So
it's
then he goes
there?
on to, I don't know. I mean, this, the article is quite long, and I spent about an hour this morning reading it, just going over it again. I will tell you this, that what he does try to prove, that the color brown is under the rubric red, like the color, that spectrum of red. And he goes on to bring a lot of proofs from different verses. One of them is actually in Zechariah, Zechariah, the first parak, the first chapter, the 8th verse, where it's talking about sus adam, adumim, susim adumim, red susim,
red horses,
and on. So he goes through that and tries to show you that the color brown is under the color red. And also because the Torah will use, Chazal, our rabbis will use expressions such as general horses are red. Now horses aren't red in the red that we understand. They're brown. So he shows you that they would interchange brown and red for the color red.
I mean, like an Irish setter is a red dog, but it's not red. It's brownish red.
He also brings another proof that's really interesting about the color red, is that it would talk about how certain great rabbis wore red clothing. And they say, well, that's impossible because someone who has Yirat Shamayim, or a Talmid Chacham, or a great rabbi, should not wear red because it's not considered a modest color. It's very bright and showy. So actually a rabbi shouldn't. So The point being is they prove from that also,
It's
we're talking about brown, not red.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about colors of clothing in those days, they were pretty plain.
Yeah.
The colors, right?
Yeah.
White, black, and probably brown, and all shades of brown.
Mm-hmm.
So they knew what brown was,
Right.
but it all associated with red.
Right.
Okay?
Got it,
So
yeah.
that's the beginning.
Uh-huh.
Should we take a break?
We've been talking about 15 minutes now, so you want to take a break? And
No, we
turn it
can
into-
finish off. Forget it. We'll just finish off now.
We could turn it into 2 shows if you think we...
I don't know if we have enough material.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. Okay. So essentially what he ends off the article
Mm-hmm.
is that the color red is, there is no real color red. Brown can also be red. And he brings Rav Sadia Gaon,
Mm-hmm.
who was one of the great scholars of the Gaonic period, which is around 900.
Right, CE.
Okay? And he brings the Rav Sadia Gaon, who actually says that the Para Aduma
Uh-huh.
was actually a brownish yellow color to it,
Uh-huh. Wow.
which would essentially be almost any cow.
Any cow that has
Doesn't
a
have
pure color,
white,
right?
right, and
Not
the-
not a Holstein. Holsteins are black and white.
Right. No, they also say is, what does it mean? Like, what is the thing that makes a cow, this Paraduma, puzzle?
Mhm.
So they try and
Pasul
analyze from the
means,
psukim, prohibited
Right. Okay.
or
invalid.
Yeah. And this is also interesting. So they said, if you look in the halachot, what makes the laws, what makes it, renders it invalid,
Mhm.
is actually white or black hairs.
The other colors.
But it didn't say brown hairs. It doesn't say any
right.
other color hairs.
Right.
Just black and white, which is 2 of the colors of the
Right.
4 in the spectrum, right?
Right.
And so those 2 colors render it pasul. That also gives you a sense is that if it was yellowish, brownish, as the Rav Sadia Gaon says, it would seem to be okay.
Mm-hmm. So there are. I mean, I know a few breeds of cows. There's like the Jersey cow, which I think is a beautiful brown. It's not as red, certainly not as red as the red Angus, but from what you're saying, that would also qualify as a potential red heifer.
Correct.
Now, the word tumima, pure, unblemished, that refer to the color or refer to having a scar or a wound or something? Is that...
Okay, so there are there's 2 different sides to that. Exactly as you said, both of those possibilities exist.
Mm-hmm.
That the word timima is, what it means is, according to one, is no white or black.
Uh-huh.
So it's talking about the aduma.
Right.
It's telling you how is an unblemished red heifer is if it doesn't have black or white hairs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the flip side, of course, is tamima also means it doesn't have a blemish on it. It's not missing a leg or an arm
Right,
or something,
right.
to that extent, or an ear even, or having a mark in its eye, even a
Right,
line in its eye. Is a
today
blemish.
the cattle growers always put a tag in the ear, and if anybody has a newborn heifer that they think might qualify for a red heifer, don't put that tag in the ear because that will automatically disqualify because that creates a blemish.
Right.
So
Just to end off here,
Yeah.
I just want to caution everybody that Rav Azari here is not rendering a halacha right now.
mhm,
Okay? But what he's trying to do, because one of the biggest problems in the red heifer is that there's been very few people over the centuries who have actually dealt with these issues.
mhm, right.
And actually what's interesting is a lot of the material that Rav Azaria got were from professors who are experts on color.
Mhm, wow.
And then he had to put it together with the verses and the
Right.
different gemaras. This has been
Tremendous amount
addressed
of
by a
research.
few scholars, but it's limited, very,
Mhm.
very limited. So what he's trying to get at, Rav Azari, here is, I think that the definition of red has a much wider definition,
Mhm,
and perhaps it would include even brownish animals. And he brings that as a proof, the red Angus.
right,
Okay, it's not really red,
right.
but it's called the red Angus.
It's
And I believe that that's what the paraduma is in the Golan, right?
right. Yeah, I mean, a red Angus is not, again, it's not fire engine red,
Correct.
but it's, I think anybody, who would see one would say, oh, there's a red cow, because we, again, in modern usage, we all call all sorts of things red.
Gingy
Gingy.
is a redhead, but he's not
Right.
really redheaded.
That's Hebrew, gingy. It's not really Hebrew, but it's, I
Right.
guess, I don't know what it's from, ginger, I don't know, but it's not really, yeah. Think about it. You keep this thought in your head throughout the day and look around and you'll say, oh, that's red, and it's, an apple's red. A brick is red. There's
Right.
like,
So
and
many
they're all
reds.
very different. But again, I think we're talking about anything in terms of our Parah Adumah, red heifer, anything in the red spectrum. And again, the big challenge, which we've been challenged by trying to raise a red heifer, is that there are no black or white hairs. I guess that it's very unlikely that a cow would ever have a green hair, which is the other color.
Right.
So black and white are really the ones that you have to look. And again, I know from experience that when we've had red heifer candidates and they've been examined and become invalid, it's because either of a white or a black hair. I mean, that's what else could there be? That's it. That's white or a black hair. Okay, so again, people get a little bit impatient with us sometimes. We're trying to raise a red heifer. We don't have a budget that we can afford to raise 1,000 red Angus cows, for example, at once. So it takes time, and these are real challenges. It's not.
And also, the research here is very limited. There's a dearth of research on this topic by rabbis throughout the centuries. And what you have to understand is most rabbis throughout the centuries, essentially, any Talmudic, any tractates in the Talmud that addressed the issues of the temple, they ignored. They just didn't comment on it. It wasn't there. And the reason's very simple, because they were very focused on their communities to be able to give them the halachot, the laws that they needed immediately. They didn't have access to books like we do today, and your local rabbi. It was very different. So what I just say is be patient, because we are now sort of discovering and uncovering these laws and these issues. As you can see, as I just showed you today, how complex it is even with regards to the colors, how to define colors within the principles of halakha, of Jewish law.
And just in conclusion,
I
just want to say that, again, part of the process of arriving at a new red heifer is all this research, because you have to know what you're doing, what you're looking for. And that research is being done by Rav Azari, and he has a team of researchers. This is part of what the Temple Institute does, and this is his full-time job, research. And the red heifer is again, like you said at the beginning, it's really his expertise. There's nobody else in the world that has his knowledge about it, has put nearly the amount of time into studying it. And I think we've given you a glimpse today of the breadth and the depth of this type of research. It's research in the highest level of any standard.
Yeah.
So thanks for being with us, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
Thank you.
Temple Jam.